Although we've escaped a lot of civility and First Amendment issues on our campus in terms of not having a lot of problems crop up, it's anticipated that this kind of thing will be something that becomes more and more in the forefront of students' concerns and faculty concerns in the next decade. So we've invited two of our friends, our best friends from higher education in Virginia, Rear Dawson Wilson from the University of Virginia, who also was our neighbor at Hampton University for 19 years, where she ran the student union. At this point in time, she is the director of Newton Hall in the University Union at the University of Virginia. She is also a talented musician, being quite accomplished as a pianist. She is a nationally and internationally recognized speaker in multiculturalism and a trainer. And she comes to us today right off of a retreat in Northern Virginia last evening. But no problem is too big for Rear Dawson Wilson. I went to school with her at Hampton University and again at William and Mary. And during our tenure at William and Mary, when she was in the doctoral program, she was continuing to manage the student union. Nothing ever daunted Rear. Fires in university halls a day or so before thousands of freshmen were to descend on campus. That was not a problem for her. She simply began to commandeer local motels and hotels and private residences near the campus to house the students. So she comes to us as a veteran in higher education in terms of all of the things that can go right and go wrong at colleges and universities, and also as a good friend and neighbor. Our other speaker is Fred Talbot. Fred comes to us from Old Dominion University, where he is a professor in the English department. He is also an award-winning news reporter and journalist. He's a journalism educator. He is a public affairs consultant, and you may have read in our local paper recently that he was a consultant to the White House speechwriters. He has written for Saturday Night Live and is currently working on a novel in the Stephen King genre. He lives in Virginia Beach with his wife, Patsy, who happens to be a faculty member at Tidewater Community College in Chesapeake. So another close member of the higher education family on the peninsula. Without further ado, I bring to you Rear Dawson and Fred Talbot.
I have to readjust my mental state to be more civil, because 3 days in the woods was not anything that I want to share with you about civility. I'll tell you, I am not an outdoors person. I am really a luxurious person. I like jacuzzis and warm water and all of that. And we took 40 students who are our leaders of our university union up to Hemlock Lookout, or something owned by George Mason up in Northern Virginia. We got back last night about 5. I must tell you, I stayed in shower about a half hour. But it's nice to be here. I don't get to come home as much as I would like now that I have moved up to quote the university. And Fred and I were sitting here talking. You know, I can talk forever, but I'll try to put some kind of structure to this. And when I talked to him on the phone, we were saying, I was trying to think of, what civility meant and what I could say to you. I had done a workshop with some students from all the community colleges up in Charlottesville this early part of the summer, and met some of your wonderful students from Thomas Nelson. So I think you have great opportunities, but it's nice to talk to faculty because I can get away with it in the sense that I was faculty and taught in the graduate program at Hampton, and up until this very year, my mother was the VP for academic affairs at Hampton. And I had a ball talking to her about what I didn't think faculty did, and she'd come back and say, well, you all the student affairs don't do this, that, and the other. So I have this vantage point, too. Well, let me just tell you that I went to Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana in 1960, actually, and majored in piano. And I went into my little ragged gown, and my dad has dropped me off. And the deal was, since you chose to go as far away from home as you possibly could, you could only come back home one time. Christmas. So I don't know what my thoughts were. I must tell you, I'd gone to all segregated high school. All my experiences have been segregated. But for whatever reasons, I wasn't prepared for when I got to my room that day and this young white woman walked in and her mother said, oh no, you can't live with her. I was thinking, is there something wrong? Of course, I was much smaller, much more attractive, and had a great head, yeah. And the woman broke the lease by paying $1,000 for that kind of experience so she could have the pleasure of my company. And then I think about what I see happening at UVA every day. If you just keep up with the news, I don't have to tell anybody about our drug thing. I don't discuss that. I don't feel like it. But if you look at the kinds of things that are happening in terms of the Fijis, and they put the thing up that said no nigger babes, no wasp all over. And the Omegas did a big poster for something, and they held this white head with this sickle, and they were going to chop it off. And as I look at even what I saw up at Retreat Center yesterday, one of my colleagues was bringing to closure a very powerful and moving exercise, and the person in the kitchen wanted the dishes. So instead of just kind of waiting, or there were 4 other staff there with us, and just kind of, just letting him, he just walks up and walks in, we need the trays. And you just wonder. So I'm not sure what's happening out here in this world. And I have 2 daughters, both grown, thank the Lord. But one went to Howard and finished and is okay. The other is at the University of Virginia, and there's such a difference in what I have created, I must tell you, and I'm not sure I'm proud of it. Some days I am. But in some ways, these young women have more stereotypes within them, more negative views of people who are different for whatever reason than I ever had in the environment that I came up with. And I must think that a lot of this really is due to the fact that I was taught from a child that one respects everybody, irregardless of what they are, and that we in higher education have become a very reactionary group of people. And that any time there's a problem, we manage by crisis, and we decide, well, we'll just give them what we want. And my clear example, and a lot of people don't agree with me, is that while we have so many separate organizations on our campuses, including yours, and while we allow them to continue without trying to do some things to pull them together. And if we look at the late 60s and the 70s, there were all these reactions to everything that was happening in the civil rights movement and all those kinds of things. And what I really think happened is that we in higher education didn't know how to deal with it, didn't take the time to try to find out, didn't try to create methods for doing it. So we took this money and we said, here, take this money, go have your house, go have your floor, go have your little wing. And now we can't undo that. And we have created a generation of young people and old people and middle-aged people who really don't know how to treat each other and spend so much time emphasizing their differences and not looking for their similarities. And I think that's really the root of the problem. Now, how you solve it requires the effort of all of us. One of the things that I really like about this opportunity to talk with you this morning is that for too long, those of us in student affairs stay over there and say, well, we know how to do this, and we get along with them, and they like us because we don't give them grades. And those of you that are in the classroom don't take the time to come interact with them, and we don't come interact with you. So what we got is students in particular in the community colleges who, because of what they're doing, part-time, family commitments, and so forth, come, take their classes, go home, and then try to talk about their neighbors and beat their neighbors and put the flags out on the lawn with their neighbors, and there's never an opportunity for any kind of dialogue. So that's my little preference with that, since I can run on for a minute. But then when I was also looking for this, I ran across this article, and I wanted to just share with you 1 month of the kind of things that are happening on our campuses. It was April the 1st, vandals spray painted, Jew haters will pay, that was in quote. And other slogans on the office wall of the Michigan Daily at the University of Michigan in response to editorials condemning Israel for policies regarding the Palestinians. Southern Connecticut University reported they suspended 5 fraternity officers after a racial brawl. April the 2nd, several gay men at the University of Connecticut are taunted by 2 students who yelled faggot at them. April the 3rd, the University of Michigan faculty meet to discuss a proposal to require students to take a course on ethnicity and racism. And I must stop right there and telling you, requiring people to be civil is not going to get it. We have to role model, we have to be example setters, and we have to work with them. We can require all we want, but that is not going to guarantee that that person is going to go out of your class and be respectful of the person that he interacts with, or he or she interacts with. What else? It's a bunch of them. They just go on and on and on. They're real depressing. And then, you could say to me if you wanted to, but I wouldn't let you get away with it, is that those kinds of things happen to undergraduates. And I want to tell you that that's really not true. That happens to the people you're working with every day, because those people are the people that make decisions for your communities. So those are the kind of people who about a week ago, I read in the paper, decided that a woman that was 103 and black couldn't be buried in a particular cemetery. I don't know how many of you saw that. Those are the kind of people that decide that if your child is going to pass AIDS, then my children can't go to school with your children. So clearly this is not just the undergraduate population. I caught the tail end of your president out there too, where he clearly talks about the changing demographics and the kind of students that we're all going to be teaching and working with. So clearly we know that it's affecting all of us. I think one of the advantages you may well have as a community college is that you are more prepared to deal with part-time students, students who are older, and students who are more non-traditional. And we like to just keep on saying, you know, we deal with these 18 to 22-year-olds and that once we get them there, they're okay. But that's not true either. I guess for higher education, one of the decisions schools like UVA will have to decide is how committed they are to civility. Because I think that you can get away with talking about it and get away with having it on paper. But to really be committed to that means that we're going to have to enroll some different kind of people than presently are enrolled at the university. You know what I mean? So as long as we can function as the university and just be very, very selective, of course we don't do that in state schools, but be very, very, very selective about who comes, we will, you know, not really be impacted by so much of these things we think as, say, a Norfolk State. But what happens, of course, is clearly that my colleagues and I are really ill-prepared to deal with the students who do the things like make the signs and the flyers and so forth. So, moving on, this time is running out, I'm afraid it'll kill me too. This is the book out. I know, how many of you are familiar with this? Well, see, that's the student affairs profession. We are calling this the Bible of the year. I really would encourage you to read it. I don't have time or the energy to share all of it with you. But it's called Campus Life in Search of Community. And it's done by the Carnegie Foundation and in particular Boyer. And I had the privilege of hearing him speak in the last 3 months. And he talks about the importance of community. Community being made up of faculty, staff, and students. And that if one part of the community is concerned about student civility, then the other part must be concerned. And as long as only one portion is concerned, then it won't be. Anyway, he talks about this book. In this book, he talks about the abusive language we hear, the lack of respect that we have for each other, the separation and unhealthy ways that we see going on, the biases against women, the racial tensions. He talks about all those kinds of things, the gay bashing, and things that unfortunately I must tell you I see every day. And what he does is, as some kind of, and then he talks about changing demographics. But what he does is, after looking at all of these things and conducting some research, he comes up with what he feels are 6 principles for creating the kind of community we're going to need in order to be able to survive. And as my students said up at the retreat, they don't like the word multiculturalism, so they said the M word. And I just jumped all on them too about not saying the M word, you know. And we got into healthy debates up there about being politically correct and so forth. But I want to tell you that I came away renewed because it was an open and an honest dialogue. I do not agree with being politically correct, but I felt like they had an opportunity to say whether they did or they didn't, and their thoughts in a very safe environment. Nobody came away from there screaming and yelling and cussing. And those are the kinds of opportunities I think you're going to have to create in whatever it is you teach and do at Thomas Nelson, so that your students have a chance for dialogue. Anyway, in the 6 things he says that for this community that we need, they've got to be educationally purposeful. And by that he means that faculty and students must share academic goals and work together to strengthen teaching and learning on campus. That's the purpose of what it is we do. The other thing he says is that we've got to have open communities, and that's the one I'm going to come back to, because the quote he uses is this one, where freedom of expression is uncompromisingly protected and where civility is powerfully defended. The third thing he talks about is it's got to be a just community where the sacredness of the person is honored and where diversity is aggressively pursued. The fourth one is a disciplined community, and what he says there is that individuals must accept their obligations to the group And where else they define governance procedures, in other words, where the rules and regulations are just and fair and we will follow. The fifth thing he says is that it's got to be a caring community. And I always like that word. I just kind of like that. It goes with my musical sense. Where the well-being of each member is seriously supported. And that's really important for me. I think that we teach our students to take risks and in doing that, we got to make sure that we care about them. I think probably the thing that makes me successful, frankly, in my endeavors is that I really do like my students, even the ones that drive me crazy that day. And I think that we have to be able to demonstrate that. I think that's what makes us different from some businesses sometimes. And the last thing he says is that we have to be a celebrative community. We have to recognize and celebrate the traditions. You know, I joke a lot about Thomas Jefferson, but I must tell you that they have wonderful traditions at UVA. I joke about Hampton, but we had wonderful traditions. Those that make us celebrate that we are glad we are part of. And so, you know, I don't know how you do that other than conversation and communication. And I think that I want to tell you that if you don't do it, I don't know who will do it, particularly with the students you work with, because I may not ever see them in the union. And if I do, it may be to see a counselor, it may be to buy a book, it may be to pick up their registration, but it may not be, as it is at a typically undergraduate institution, to sit down and have a cup of coffee, or to go watch TV, or to shoot pool, because the union on a traditionally community college campus is really much more of a service-oriented than the one we have. So you really have golden opportunities to help these students become more civil. Of course, that makes one great assumption, and that is that you learn to be a civil person yourself. Because I expect that we have to be the role models and set the examples. Whether you like it or not, they didn't get it at home a lot of times. So whether you like it or not, this whole in loco parentis, I think we get confused by what that means versus what it means to demonstrate by example how you treat each other. So if you all can't communicate as faculty and staff, and you don't get along, and you pass each other and don't speak, and you talk about Mr. So-and-so in his class, and you talk about Miss So-and-so, and you make all those kind of comments, I really don't know what you expect your students to do. Because people learn best by example, whether they're older learners, young learners, little children, whatever it is. And I just think we have to start looking at that. And I'm going to sit down after I leave you with this thought that I found that I really liked by a Yale undergraduate committee and C. Van Woodward. And he said, no member of the community with a decent respect for others should use or encourage others to use slurs and epithets intended to discredit another's race, ethnic group, religion, or sex. It may sometimes be necessary in a university for civility and mutual respect to be superseded by the need to guarantee free expression. The values superseded are nevertheless important, and every member of the university community should consider them in exercising the fundamental right of free expression. The conclusions we draw then are these. Even when some members of the community fail to meet their social and ethical responsibilities, the paramount obligation of the university is to protect their right to free expression. If the university's overriding commitment to free expression is to be sustained, secondary social and ethical responsibilities must be left to the informal processes of persuasion, example, and argument. And I would suggest to you that the only places that persuasion, suggestion, and argument can occur so that our students will be civil are in your classrooms. I thank you and turn it over to Fred.
I think she said it all, so I'll go ahead and have a seat and pass around the water. I was really delighted to see that my reputation preceded me today. I was in the restroom washing up, and when I went to use the hand dryer, I noticed right above the button someone had written, "Push here for a talk by Fred Talbot." So, yes. And Pam was nice to invite me. I said, "Well, I really appreciate you letting me come in and talk about this very, very meaningful subject." And she said, "Well, they've never really seen a guy with 3 chins before, so I thought we'd bring you on that." So, go ahead and bask in that one, I guess. We know the First Amendment. We know how important that is, and I think Greer just pointed out how significant it is on campus. It is campus. It is a university. It is a community college. I'm, by the way, delighted to be at a community college. because I taught for 4 years at a community college in South Carolina, and it was wonderful. I mean, it was almost like parenting again, because it was such a close relationship, I thought, with my students, and it was very diverse. It was predominantly black in South Carolina, and it was a wonderful, happy experience. I'm going to say a few things today that will get me in trouble. I'm always in trouble about higher education, universities in particular, and that don't exactly reflect what I just said about community colleges. So hang on for a second and let's see what happens. Got to laugh in the other room, by the way. That I pointed out. First Amendment, 14th Amendment, no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, and property, including their First Amendment rights, freedom of expression, chilling effects, prior restraint. You hear all these types of things from lawyers and First Amendment scholars and people who pretend they are like me. I really wonder what's going on right now. I see all kinds of strange things happening. In the 60s, we went out and marched and even had fistfights on occasion in my hometown of Petersburg to make certain that prejudice was basically eradicated. We partied together, we had fun together, we joked together. And I'm from the west end of Petersburg, which is a very, very rough, working class, predominantly black neighborhood. And all my friends could joke about everything, and we could play sports together, and we could be friends together, and we could succeed together and plan lives together. And the weirdest thing is, most of us from that neighborhood did okay. We became lawyers, we became doctors, we became pilots. And what happened? What clicked? We could joke about race. Joke about race. Call me whitey. What you doing walking around? You know, that type of thing. I could joke about it. We could joke about our mothers. Can you imagine? We could joke about your mama. We're like, and everybody laughed and got along, and we loved one another. Can't do that now. Can't do it, especially about your mom. You said, what about my mom? The guy called me the other day. He said, 25 years ago, you said, what about my mom? Let me get on diversity. Listen to this statement. This is a really neat statement. The United States is a nation of individualism and rich cultural diversities. If there is any fixed star in our constitutional constellation, it is that no official, high or petty, can prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, nationalism, religion, or other matters of opinion. In other words, let's have openness. Let's respect diversity. Guess when that was written? 1943 by Justice Robert Jackson. 1943. He got the light back then. We had it in the 60s and in the 70s. We're trying to get it back now. But as Greer said, certain things happened in the 60s and the 70s to sort of maybe lock up what we're doing now. Lock up the openness we have now. What about eggshells? Do any of you step on eggshells nowadays? You walk into class and go, be careful what I say. I'm walking like, you know, that type of thing. Afraid you don't pop an eggshell, might offend somebody. Now I teach humor. I teach First Amendment law, I teach investigative reporting, and I teach humor. Excuse the term, I piss off everyone. You know what? Everyone. Really. Investigative reporting at a university? Can you imagine that? It's like teaching demonics at a Catholic school. Incredible. What do you do here? And I teach my students, I say, question everything. Because the most open-minded person I ever met was a Methodist preacher. He was a professor at the college I went to. And he said, question your religion. Question your faith, question God. It's the only way you'll ever have any faith. If you accept it openly without questioning it, you never believe it. So I tell my students, question everything. Everything to come, all the good stuff, all the things, everything. Question. Question the war. In Norfolk, question the war. Can you imagine? You know, they have a stealth bombers like aimed at my classroom. What a time we had. But yeah, question it all. Because I don't want them, above all else, to be cowards. And sissies, and weaklings, and wimps in society. And you know what scares me about all this? Because that's what I'm seeing now. I'm seeing a lot of chicken, bureaucrats, yes people, no dissent, or very little dissent, very little questioning. And that doesn't seem very American to me, for some reason. It seems cowardly. About a lot of things. I see black and white students on occasion who are great and very open and very caring, but so afraid to talk to one another. Why? Go talk to them. Then they talk and hit it off great. But why? Why is there fear now? Why are there eggshells out there? I say I'm going to break all the eggshells with humor, with questions, with columns in newspapers, okay, that sometimes reflect views we don't like. And then we go, that columnist is bad. That Jim Spencer, wasn't it? It's so bad because he questions whether the playing field we claim we're trying to make level is really level. Okay? He raised a question. Okay? So he's evil. Jim Spencer, to be honest with you, I worked with Jim Spencer at Virginia Power. And I've known him since, I guess, 1979. And I would dare say that Jim Spencer has personally, this is my music, by the way, I'm going to dance in 1 second. As Jim now. But Jim has done more individually, I think, for the underdog than anybody I've ever met. I mean, this guy's out every Wednesday delivering lunches to people, okay, in the ghetto. And it is a ghetto in Newport News. People are afraid to come to the door. Okay? This guy, I've seen he carry people out of houses after fires have devastated the houses. And but also this guy will raise a question. We don't have enough devil's advocates, folks. We really don't. To raise questions in all these different areas, all these different ways. That's Fred preaching, and what does Fred know? Let me tell you a couple things I've seen though. Blind obedience. I've seen a lot of this at the university. PCs came through, what, about a year and a half ago, real strong. PCs, okay? I think they call it politically correct. I call it public censors or putrid by convenience. I don't know. It's strange. There's only good one like that. And I said, well, what is am I today? Just curious, okay? I was a racist one day. Worked in civil rights since I was 12, but I was a racist one day because I tried to help some younger faculty with their salaries, and an older faculty member hated me. So he turned me in as a racist on something I didn't do, okay, to a vice president under a system in which they didn't have to be named. In other words, I said, well, who said I was a racist? Well, we can't say that. I said, well, I've been accused of being a rapist. I don't know who accused me, but they accused me of a racist. I don't know. That's right. What am I today? Sexist? You know, what am I today? I don't know. A linguist? I mean, God forbid. I don't know. Anyway, those types of things going on. Let me tell you a little bit about PCs. Randall Jarrell, in a little book called Pictures of an Institution, I think best defined the PCs. For Gertrude, the world existed in order to be put in its place. Okay, think about that. Going to work every day, I'm going to fix this world. I'll tell people exactly what they're doing. William Butler Yeats said, all empty souls tend to an extreme opinion. And Tertullian, if I can pronounce his name correctly, said the first reaction to truth is hatred. Okay. Harry Truman says the corruption of truth, the abandonment of our devotion to fair play is the unfounded accusation against any citizen in the name of Americanism and righteousness. This horrible cancer is eating at the vitals of America, and it can destroy the great edifice of freedom. Harry Truman said it. But PCs? No. He said it about McCarthyism. And I see a few similarities there for some strange reason. Let me tell you about PCs just quickly, as we talk about our experiences with race and with diversity. I think PCs are racist. I think it's a racist-based process, not intended. I got that from the president of our student chapter in the ACT. Because he said, you know what's happening? He said, these people are putting us over in a corner, and we don't want to be in a corner. We want to be operating as students and as student leaders. But they're saying, no, let's put them on a pedestal, put them over to the side. He said, Mr. Pell, we've been to the side for 400 years. We don't want that anymore. Let me tell you what happened with PCs during the last year or so. The only racial attack I've ever heard of Governor Wilder came from a leading PC on my campus. When Governor Wilder did something that went against the grain of the Almighty, he said, you got to give back part of my pay raise. My department's PCs got together and wrote a vicious personal attack against Governor Wilder. It wasn't racist, it was just vicious. And I said, hey, you're not going to issue that statement. That's crazy. Okay? That's nuts, and it's wrong. The man is trying to balance, in effect, the spending and pay among Virginia employees. And then one of them took me aside and made a statement to me I couldn't believe about how blacks perceive higher education. And this is one of our leading PC spokesmen. About 3 months later, I headed up a conference named the Brennan Lecture Series. And a gentleman by the name of Juan Williams came down. Juan wrote Eyes on the Prize. A wonderful individual. Just a good individual. He gave the best civil rights talk I've heard since I heard Dr. King when I was young. One person in my English department showed up. Here. 2 mentioned it in the classes. We're not going to have the Brennan Lecture Series anymore. Guess why they didn't show up? Most of them. Take a wild guess. Just wild, not race. You look at my little, in the little handout there, I also had something called freedom of information. That means openness, open government, whatever. And 2 years ago, my students printed salaries at Old Dominion University. And all the faculty raised hell about it. And I stood with the kids and said, it's open information. A couple of my faculty colleagues had 17 and 26% pay raises. They fomented hatred against me. And Juan Williams came, and I pushed, hey, really, let's get all of our students there to hear this message. Fred Talbot is involved in it. And lastly, I've been helping the NACP put together a newsletter on a Macintosh computer. Boy, talk about writing. Good Lord. Caring, ethic, quality, excellence. Okay? Took them in the Mac lab one day, president and vice president, all excited, never used the Macintosh, all graphics. 2 students were there who work in the Mac. They said, we'd love to work with you on this newsletter. It would be wonderful. Wonderful work with them. They're excited. I'm looking. 2 white students, 2 black students. Perfect partnership. Like it. Great sense of humor. Great quality ethic. Okay? So this is fantastic. The student tells me, and I quote, yeah, we do it for a lot of student organizations. Students who are taking the advanced graphics are encouraged to do newsletters. Organizations. Some people even do it for businesses outside the university. Okay? President of the NACP chapter came to see me 2 days later and said, Stella, well, let me do it. Why not? Went to see the grad student who told us, come on in. You know what she said? Told him we were going to do it for a student organization. Professor said, great. PC professor, great. Told him it was the NACP chapter. It's great. Told him you were the one helping him. Just say you can't do it. Now, I don't mind being a troublemaker and stirring the pot. But what did that do to those students? You know? And that's what made me realize, finally, that PC is a matter of degree and a matter of convenience. If it didn't, let's take this test real quick. How many of us own a house, or none of us own a house? How many of us are indebted forever in mortgage? Okay? We really, if PC is pure and diversity is totally pure, I'm part Native American. Okay? How many of us would be willing to, in the purest ethical sense of diversity and fairness, give our deeds over to Native Americans and go back to wherever my people came from 800 places? How many of us would do that? How many of us would apologize for the, in effect, genocide we committed on Native Americans? Have any of us done it? How many of us would go over to 7-Eleven, 4 miles from here, for a buddy of mine who has a master's in civil engineering, is working at 7-Eleven because he's Iranian, he was a pilot, fighting for the Shah, who was one of our closest allies, and then lost everything, including the right to ever see his family again, when he had to abandon, on penalty of death, his nation for us. And now he's over here, and his line's being tapped by the FBI. He's being hassled every day. He's a great butt of jokes on Saturday Night Live. I don't write them. Okay? He's Iranian. But he's not in the category now we're dealing with, is he? The Native Americans sort of aren't either. All of us should come together, I think. The one thing I try to preach, and you can tell now I'm preaching a little bit. Sam's saying, no jokes, no jokes. But, because I do so many jokes. This is serious for me. One thing I try to teach, and I try to teach my daughter, is for God's sakes, let's all go blind for a while. Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The only 2 things I can't control are my heritage. Really, I can't control that. I wasn't there. And my skin color. I can't control that. I wasn't there. That just happened. I'm sorry. But let me tell you about the taste of that, of all of it, and how I got the message. Being raised in Petersburg, in a rough area, I went to the rough school. I was telling Greer about this. First day in high school, the rich kids from the rich kids school came, where most of the teachers lived. Okay? We're asking class. I don't know these kids. I'm scared to death. My height, this size head, 120 pounds. You can imagine, okay? Talk about embarrassed. I'm walking in, I'm sitting there like this. Teacher says, everybody, where are you from? What's your name? Where are you from? What do you want to do? Go up now. Kid in front of me. I'm from Walnut Hill. My dad's a lawyer. I want to be a lawyer. Okay? Second kid, engineer. I stand up. I've been to the newspaper 3 weeks earlier. I stand up. Fred Talbot, I'm from 1146 West Washington Street. I think I want to be a writer. I said, oh, thank you. After class, she calls me up within earshot of the other kids. Says, where'd you say you're from? I said, 1146 West Washington Street. She said, you're from Niggertown. You don't be a writer. And I hated high school's guts from that point on. And I got it with a C average. because I just despised it. Turned off completely. Turned off completely. The other part of it that I heard, and I hear this a lot, is you ain't nothing. You're not going to amount to anything. You're crap. Who do you think you are? I heard that white community. I hear it now. My students coming to me and saying, crying. One guy. I said, where are you? You always do great work and then you don't finish the semester. What's going on? He says, I go home to Churchill or Richmond. And every time I do this, who the hell do you think you are? Come in here talking like that. You think you're smart, don't you? Who do you think you are? And then you get some fights. Okay. I don't know what we can do, but I'll tell you, in class, sometimes we've got to re-nurture. Sometimes we've got to retrain. Sometimes we've got to reparent, even, to be good, in effect, effective teachers. We've got to do more than we've ever been called upon to do before. Because they're not doing it in the street. They're not doing it at home. They're not doing it in the bureaucratic hell known as elementary, junior high, and high school. Now, they don't have time with 40 and 50 kids piling in there every hour. So we've got to do it. And I think we can do it. But anyway, let me throw a few things your way if I could, because I think they're kind of nice, and I like them, and I think it's wonderful. First of all, one thing that I'm amazed at in higher education is this. Everything that doesn't work, we're creating something new. Everything that doesn't seem to work in higher education, but we keep, is called tradition. You notice that too? It's like it has no meaning. It says, what is tradition? Well, it is. It's been like that for a while. You know, I'm thinking, my God. Tradition does not mean that the living are dead. It means that the dead are living anyway. Booker T. Washington, a lot of my friends, so I studied black culture in college before you were supposed to. Really, in 1969, I went over to Bethune-Cookman for 6 months and really got out in the community and the whole thing. And back then, a lot of my buddies who were Muslim then, and I was real big with Malcolm X. I thought, I mean, the guy was right. You got to read the guy. I mean, he's awesome. And also Dr. King, who was a real hero, the only hero we had. But Booker T. Washington was Tom. You know, Tom. That's my buddy said, Tom, we're tearing in his statue. I said, don't mess with the statue's dead. No. Listen to this. This is kind of nice. The black man who cannot let love and sympathy go out to the white man is but half free. The white man who retards his own development by opposing the black man is but half free. And that's true, because whenever I see anyone who doesn't tolerate someone else because of the way they look, I mean, good, great. They're half, excuse the term, assed. They really are. They look stupid. It's crazy. You can't, I don't like her the way she looks. I don't like it, you know, you could see me when I had zits and stuff, you know, don't make fun, come on. Walt Whitman says, whoever degrades another degrades me, and that's how I feel like that. When somebody degrades someone else. You feel degraded yourself, don't you? If you're around some redneck or whatever, and they're doing it, or some, let's face it, a brother in the street, you know, attacking a white guy. Let's face it, you feel cheap. You feel like you've been attacked. And then Martin Luther King, and listen to what he said. This is beautiful. Not the way I read it, but it was beautiful when he read it. I said it. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation when they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. If we're going to judge people for any reason, let's do it on the basis, and the only basis, of character. That's the key. I really do. I think that's the blind spot right there. Then we don't look anymore at what you look like. Look at what you do, who you are from what you do. But I've talked too much now. Pam, I'll turn it over to you, and away we go. Thanks a lot.
At this point in time, we have about 10 minutes for you to address questions to either Fred or Greer, or just observations that you might want to make.
Or any water if you'd like.
We got it. We got the water. See, that's called being civil. I didn't want to interrupt him while he was talking, but I wanted this water.
Your questions or comments?
Any comments or questions?
Great, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, I see how, being PC, being a white male is a 4-letter word, or being phallocentric, or whatever they say. But a question I have is how do you, the society is changing.
Yeah.
And how do we integrate women writers, black writers, gay writers? How do we integrate them into the curriculum? It seems, as you were saying, the leadership is coming from outside.
I tell you what, I try to find good writers. That's what I do. And if they're women or black or what, good writers.
But
How do we get good writers? Is the question I would ask you. How do we get them?
by nurturing. And but the question, I guess the observation I have is from the outer society, when you have a president running on a racial, the Willie Horton campaign, doesn't that give the racists on the campus ammunition? Just as the same way, you're saying about lack of strong people being un-American, or perhaps we're just a passive-aggressive society. Just as we have when we have blacks being anti-Semitic, or
Everybody's pointing at everyone else.
right,
You know
right,
what?
and no one speaks up against it.
Yeah. Why not?
I don't.
I think it's because of eggshells again. I think
Right.
everybody's afraid.
Right.
And you talk about great writers. The hardest thing I'm finding now in nurturing good writers is a lot of people are afraid to write from their gut. They're afraid to. They're afraid to, man, I want chicks, man. They're afraid to do it. They may be perceived as something is. And it's crazy. But you know something, and I know she's ready to go.
No, I was just thinking, I just don't have these fears.
I want to say one thing about the whole process that I think it's just a strategic thing. I just like to leave with you. Your president today mentioned one of the main factors is globalization. Okay? And I want to ask you this, and this sounds terrible, but it's true. We're in this country now, pointing at one another, you're black, you're white, you're this, you're that, we're pointing at one another, and we're licking one another's wounds and everything. And I'm thinking, and we're slowing down. It's taking a lot of time, a lot of energy, like he said. Okay? We're slowing down our process. And there are two great nations, right now, that are economically setting themselves up to not level the playing field, but to own it. And neither of those nations, excuse me for saying this, has a historical perspective of honoring ethnic or social diversity. Think about it. And when they do decide what I'm going to be doing when I'm 50, okay, I don't really think any of this is going to matter. They're going to say, who's excellent? Over here. Who's not? Over here. I don't care what color. We want efficiency and excellence. And they're coming. And we're sitting over here whining.
Yeah, I guess the other piece of that is an internal thing. Yeah, I think you have to become risk takers. I don't know, but for me, quite frankly, I don't need anybody's approval to do what I think is the right thing. So when I was teaching, William and Mary probably sorry they gave me that degree sometimes. I give all the time in class about counseling theories not being relative to women, not being relative to blacks and Hispanics. And now look at what's happening. Everybody's writing a book. I should have been smart enough to write it myself. Yeah. I guess for me, what I expect of people that are part of this wonderful academic arena is that they will be risk takers. So therefore, their students will be risk takers. My students that I have all over this country are just about as crazy as I am. And I think what they see is that I have survived, so they too shall survive. This thing about this, all about these different kinds of writers, look for good writers. What I expect for you to do, though, is clearly to research it and not be comfortable with your syllabus from 10 years ago and go find the black writer and go find the Hispanic writer. And that's what you got to be willing to invest the time.
I must say that I was never afraid to write from my gut until quite recently, which put a thought in my mind, maybe I better really think about what I say. And I thought it was a infringement on my freedom of speech and my freedom to write. But it was a terrifying experience. I mean, I almost went to jail, but that was just how I felt. So
something you wrote or something?
It was something I wrote. It wasn't against anyone in particular, but it was just
And
my
see, that's
freedom.
what, in constitutional law, that's what we call a chilling effect. You've got prior restraint, which is very dangerous. That means you can't write what you say you're going to write. That stops you. And the Supreme Court despises that. That's one of the worst things to ever come before the court. Almost every time they'll say, no, you cannot have prior restraint unless the nation is in danger. But for someone to put out, be it PCs or be it whomever is in power, to say, you better not write that. You can write it if you want, but we're going to kick your butt if you write it, or we're going to ruin you if you write it. That's a chilling effect, and that's just as bad.
I think the other thing is, and then I'll call on this, is that part of what we're seeing is a reaction to the loss of power. That the people in power realize that all of a sudden the demographics are going to change. And those people who never had any power, the perception is that we're going to take over the country and go treat them like they treated other oppressed groups of people by gender or whatever. So what is part of this from a psychological point of view is a reaction to fear of loss of power. I think that a lot of that has to do with it. The gentleman in the blue shirt.
What do you do with great writers who are offensive to some students? Say Faulkner uses the word digger so often.
Just talk it through. Talk it through. Really, I mean, in the 60s, we read everything. We read the Marquis de Sade, for God's sake.
I had students who come to me and say, I'm really offended by his use of the word digger.
And I would say, I really can appreciate your offensiveness, but let's talk about why. And then in my next class, we would talk about it. And how it does offend some people, and when do we step over that boundary? And how that's the conversation of it, that's the learning experience.
And to me, that's the sissy baby part of it too. I'm sorry, but when society said, I just can't handle this, this book makes a woman look like, oh God, a housewife, oh my God. And I'm thinking, hey, get a life, you know what I mean? There are housewives out there, all right? But if you don't like that image, let's talk about it. But most of them, oh no. And it scares me, because they're going to kick our butts. They really are. I'm serious.
I mean, if you woke up to the news this morning, okay? Now you can keep on talking all this garbage in this country if you want to. Country gonna be gone. I mean, when you went to bed last night, Gorbachev was in power, and when you woke up this morning, ain't nobody seen the man.
And the missiles are cops.
You know? That's right. So better put this thing in perspective. And if you don't teach your students who run, our students, whether they're my undergraduate students or your students at the community college or the graduate students, those are the students that are out here that do these kinds of things and make these kinds of statements, and some of them get in positions of power. But I mean, I tend to, as I have gotten older, I was a radical in college, I must tell you. But I can honestly say that some of my best friends were white. I ain't have no choice. When I went to Indiana University and majored in piano, there were 30,000 students, 200 blacks, and I was the only undergraduate black piano major. And what did you think I was going to do, flunk out of college? So I had to learn to get along, and they had to learn to get along with me, because I didn't have the luxury of going to live someplace else. And see, my mama told me, don't come home. That was just as clear as that. Come home with your degree.
But she talked with people, and I talked with people, and that's a lot of the problem I think today. They're not talking.
The thing that scares me is that when you turn the TV on every night, there are examples of just hundreds of examples of people being uncivil to each other, and it's almost like we're saying it's okay. You see baseball players beating up on each other with baseball bats, and you say, it looks like they're saying that's all right.
What happened to goodness? That's what I want to know. The one thing, really, when we raised my daughter, it was the main thing. When my mother asked, well, what do you want her to be? When she's 3, 4 years old. I thought, well, of all the things, I want her to be good. And I'm not bragging, but she's a good little person. Cares a lot about everything. Animals as well. Just everything. Life. What happened to that?
Well, part of what happens to that is that we don't practice what we preach. Example. We'll talk about all this garbage that's on TV, but we still watch it. We'll talk about all the garbage that they put in the newspapers, and we still pay our subscriptions.
Too many people take advantage of their goodness.
That's right. So and until those of us who are the silent people and don't like what's going on take some stands and stop watching the TV shows and stop reading the papers and say that offends me and somebody hears it, then it will continue, because we allow other people in positions of power to make decisions for us. And that's where I always get in trouble. Because I don't let anybody make a decision for me unless I have some say.
That's how we always get in trouble. Someone mentioned too, I
think one of the things that we better teach our children, aside from goodness, is toughness.
Oh yeah.
And to realize that April, when you go out in the world and people
got
are
it.
unjust to you or try to get you not to say what you think is the right thing or do the right thing, it's okay to do the right thing, it's okay to say the right thing, and here are some things, and in other words, sort of a self-defense.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a funny thing, because my theory with the students coming through now, through college now, is that they do have a very, very strong base belief in about goodness. I mean, I think a lot of people have tried
You
to pass
see
this
that
on.
in all of the things, you know what's happening. If you look at the trend with community, with volunteerism, and you look at the amount of stuff that's happening in terms of civic education. I was at the Kettering Foundation for a 3-day workshop, and if you look at the kinds of things that faculty are doing to really help students in terms of working with the community, giving back, and I'm talking about being more than a little candy stripes and ice cream. I'm talking about real value. It's out here. People and college students are, I'm amazed, but really are giving of their time and energy to communities. So we need to seize that in the academic classroom.
But adding to what Pam said, many of those who I've noticed